Hey guys, this is episode 21 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself, Rugby Itch, as well as the Kiwi lads. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. Playoff games just around the corner, and there's a few games this week that will definitely determine who makes their way through to those quarterfinals. Important fixtures back to back. Ireland versus Scotland, that is a game that a lot of people are looking at. Argentina, Japan, France, Italy, it's all happening this weekend. My big question, Tim, you're in France currently. The Springboks have not got a game this week. So what are you going to do with yourself? You still got a little bit longer of the French trip, I assume?
Yeah, no, I mean, at the moment, yeah, like you said, there isn't a bulk game being played this week, so it's one of those where, yeah, I guess I'm just watching all the other games in terms of rugby. But luckily, we have a few plans. We have a few family friends that we're planning to see. Like, we're actually going to head to Switzerland just for a 2-day trip because it's literally just, it's kind of across right next to the border, and we have some family friends there, so we're gonna just say hi to them, of course. But no matter what, I mean, it's been nice to relax a bit. I do definitely appreciate that aspect. I haven't been as doing as many uploads as you, which is just feel bad for you, man. But
I have
no, definitely
forgotten what relaxing is, Tim, at
exactly,
this stage of the Rugby World
exactly.
Cup.
But no, just for everyone who obviously watches my channel as well, definitely look out because I will be posting a lot in terms of the build up to the quarterfinals. So keep an eye out for that. But anyway, before we obviously talk about this whole preview for this round 5 of this Rugby World Cup, definitely make sure to like the video, guys, subscribe to our channel, check out our respective channels. And yeah, let's get straight into this. So, of course, the first game that's being played within round 5 is New Zealand versus Uruguay. It's one of those games where, again, New Zealand obviously favorites going into it. There's no doubt about that. But out of the 2 games in this group, it's not actually the one we're kind of keeping an eye out, because really all New Zealand have to really do is just get a win or even just a bonus point win, and they're kind of, they're essentially through. They'll kind of be in the same situation as the Boks, really, where, like, if you win that game, then, you're kind of in a good place where it just comes down towards that next game, which obviously is France versus Italy. So from your perspective, like, what's your thoughts on this game for New Zealand Uruguay?
I think this game for New Zealand will be about, I guess, just continuing that form that they found in that Italy game. For Uruguay, this game's going to be about pride, about trying to once again cause a bit of an impact in this group, because they have been able to do that throughout the competition thus far, beating the Namibians, also having decent showings up against Italy as well as France. So if they can do that up against New Zealand in this final round, I feel like they'll leave this competition very happy. For New Zealand, they made quite a few changes to the starting lineup, as well as coming off the bench, few different players there. Ethan Blackadder, first time we're going to get to see him in action for the ABs throughout this Rugby World Cup. And I think that for the Kiwis, they do want to get a massive win here, similar to that Italy game, but I don't know whether they can. I think Uruguay at the moment, they've been a little bit of a dark horse of this competition. I feel like them and Portugal have fallen into very similar categories, how, like, they aren't an easy beat. And if they play well, you will concede a couple tries throughout this game. But my mum backed the ABs to win by 80, and I trust my mum, so I believe it.
Fair enough. I definitely wouldn't question her on that front. But no, I guess in terms of the lineups itself, I mean, again, like you said, Ethan Blackadder obviously getting kind of his first minutes, in this World Cup. So we get to see what he can do, obviously, and bring towards this game. Again, we both kind of, looking back at our predictions, we were kind of a bit on right and, obviously, a bit wrong in terms of, I guess, the players who were starting this one. I think we both, did you go with Lomax to start in this one? Because I'm not sure if did we both go with that. So that was definitely something we got right on that front. Again, I think I'm trying to think, who did they go with? I know White Walker's playing, which is a big thing for, obviously, because he's getting his 150th. So it'll be a big, kind of just milestone really for his career, and just shows kind of his legacy in terms of rugby, just how brilliant he has and just how consistent he has really just been for the All Blacks. So it'll be good to see kind of him get a run out, obviously, in this game. But again, Sam Cane, he's obviously starting for this one, which is good to see. We want to see him get a few minutes on the board, actually, kind of make a name for himself, which is what's really needed from, your captain. So I'm hoping he can do pretty well in this one. But I guess the talking point here is really just more on the back line, because, Cam Roy obviously getting a start once again against Uruguay. I mean, I think this is something that you predicted as well, actually, to happen in this one. So what's your thoughts on him starting this game?
I'm excited. But the interesting part will be the fact that now he's partnering with Richie Mo'unga rather than Damian McKenzie. But the thing is, he kind of is, but he isn't, because McKenzie's still in that back line. Going to be playing at fullback for this game rather than Bowden Barrett. I'll be honest, if McKenzie has a standout performance here, I think it will be a bit of a headache for the selectors when it comes to those quarterfinals, because McKenzie at 15, something that people have said that if that happens, they wouldn't mind it. Maybe Barrett does become that impact player off the bench for the ABs rather than in the starting side. It is a role that he's played well in the past. I feel like because of how long they have backed him, though, throughout this World Cup, they will stick with him at number 15 and then instead have McKenzie as that impact player, mainly because of what we saw in that game last week up against the Italians. But yeah, Faina Nuku out on that left wing, Will Jordan out on the right. Quite a few Crusaders making their way into the starting lineup. But the fact that they've got both fly halves from that Super Rugby Pacific final, both in the starting lineup here, I'm wondering whether or not it's going to be chemistry or whether it's going to be cohesion. It just doesn't quite work for the ABs having those two playmakers out on the park.
I was going to say, because, like, with that as well, I can't actually remember the last time these two actually played with each other, because, like you said, it is normally Barrett and McKenzie, or we see Barrett and Mo'unga. So normally Barrett, in all honesty, is actually the glue, actually, in how he's able to adapt towards both playing styles. But I can't actually remember the last time we've seen Mo'unga and McKenzie actually partner up. So it should be interesting to watch and see what they can obviously do, because, again, are we going to see... I don't think we're going to see Mo'unga, I think, after this World Cup. I could be mistaken in that, because I think he is heading off to Japan. So that won't make him, I guess, he won't be able to play for the All Blacks in that sense. But, I want to see how this goes, because, this could be one of the last few times we see it happen. And if it works, then, maybe the All Blacks, look at this and be like, okay, this is maybe something we use going into the knockout stages. But again, it's like you said, they've used Barrett so many times, and he's literally off the bench as well. You can't get rid of him, really. Like, I even said they should rest him this week, but they just they have to have all Barretts in this squad, so it's it's Ian Foster. It's understandable.
It's compulsory. It's written in his contract.
Exactly.
He has to have the
There's
three
a rule
Barretts.
book. Exactly. But no, I am intrigued to see what Leicester can bring, obviously, in this game as well. With Will Jordan as well. So yeah, it should be good to see what the Crusaders, back line can do in this game. But anyway, we'll move away from this game now. We'll move on then towards the, really the next game in this group, which is France versus Italy. Probably the more interesting one out of the two in terms of Group A, and one that has a lot more tension going into it, because, like we said beforehand, if the All Blacks are to win this, even if they get a bonus point win, they just need to win, essentially. If they get this win, then it makes it really a playoff game, really between France and Italy. And it's going to get very tense within this game. But again, in saying that, we all thought that would be a tense game against, the All Blacks, and it just turned out to be the complete opposite. So you never know. It could be literally the exact same thing within this one. But what's your take on this going into the game? Like, do you think it'll be a close game, or do you think it could just be a wide margin once again, maybe in favor of the French?
I'm a little bit worried for Italy with their selection, mainly because we mentioned about it for that AB's game, that the week prior they had played a whole heap of guys in different positions than when they played up against the All Blacks. Now this week they've decided to switch those guys all back to what they did have a couple of weeks ago up against Uruguay. Yeah. So they have gone with Tommaso Allen at number 10 rather than 15. Capuzio, rather than being out on the wing, he's gone to fullback. Garbisi, rather than 10, has gone to 12. I think that defensively that was actually what really hurt the Italians up against the All Blacks. No player knew where they were supposed to be. And when the All Blacks were playing that fast-paced running rugby, there was just no way of getting into position quick enough. And I feel like France are going to try and push that pressure and push that speed here up against the Italians. And it's whether or not they are able to adapt to the fact that they are back into those positions where they weren't for the week prior. But it'll be interesting. I feel like Italy come into this game with, to be honest, not a lot to lose. At the end of the day, anything less than that losing margin that they had up against the All Blacks will be a huge bonus. If they can cut that down to only losing by around that 20 mark, that will be even better for them. But if they can get somehow that upset win, they actually make their way through to the quarterfinals, knocking out the hosts France, which would be by far the biggest upset, I believe, of this Rugby World Cup so far by a huge amount.
Oh, it'd be the biggest upset, really, just to knock out the host nation. The last time we saw that, of course, was England in 2015. So for the French's, kind of case here, let's not hope that happens. But man, that would be just some kind of result if it was to happen. But again, the French, they have a pretty good lineup actually going into this. They kind of have really just a first string lineup here. Besides, obviously, the main man Dupont still not selected for this one, which is understandable because it's kind of what we all thought anyway going into this game. But yeah, again, they've gone with a pretty strong lineup. I mean, I'm pretty excited to see what Dante and Fiku can do in this one because, I'm not sure if you have to remind me here, but did we see the Dante Fiku combination in the previous game when Dante came back? Because I'm not sure if we saw Fiku playing that one. I could be wrong, but
did we see him at 13?
I can check it up quickly actually here. Let me quickly check. Yeah, because I
have a feeling it might have been Arthur No, that would be too much power in the midfield, surely.
I'll check right now. So here we go. So this is the France and Namibia one. Did they go with both of them? Let's see here. Lineups. Yeah, they did. Wow. Okay, they actually did go with this. I don't know why I forgot that. I mean, I knew Dante played because he was on. I mean, he scored 2 tries in that game, so he's back to normal essentially in that sense. But I actually forgot Fiku played in this one. For some reason, I thought he was rested for this. But yeah, again, we're going to see that combination once more. So that should be intriguing to see if they can kind of get through that Italian defense. Because again, like you said, they have switched up a lot of players in terms of that back line. So that's either going to come into their favor or horribly wrong, really. So we'll see what happens in that way. But again, we'll then move on away from this game because again, this we've kind of talked a lot about this anyway, saying it's a playoff game. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens on that front. But again, going on to the next one, which I believe is, let me just scroll down here, is Argentina versus. Well, no, actually, no, not Argentina versus Chile. It's Wales versus Georgia. And with Wales versus Georgia, it's one of those games where normally you'd say this would be a wipe, kind of just a one-way traffic, really. But actually, Georgia have been very impressive throughout this Rugby World Cup. And in all honesty, I think when you said, Portugal and Uruguay have been, teams that have surprised, I actually think Georgia's in that conversation as well. I think they've actually done pretty well in the games they played. Again, they haven't, they've held teams to kind of a lower scoreline in most of their games. Again, they were blown down one, but it's what you kind of expect at the end of the day. But going into this, like, what do you think? What do you think of this game?
I wonder if Georgia had their big game last week up against the Fijians because they emptied the tank in that contest, throwing absolutely everything into it. But the big problem for Georgia, I've said it since the start of this Rugby World Cup competition, the inability at times to score tries is what has been hurting them. A lot of other sides, Portugal, for instance, Uruguay, they've still been able to score themselves that kind of 2 or 3 tries per match. I think for Georgia up against the Welsh here, they do have to be a lot more attacking than we would normally see from this Georgian side, using the likes of Ninashvili, getting Tabutsadze some meters down the wing. The midfield combo, I feel like it didn't look too bad in that game up against Fiji, but it's just about getting them the ball that little bit more. We know they've got the physical forwards. That is one thing that Georgia have shown throughout this Rugby World Cup. But for Wales, this will be a game that they want to make sure they're winning 4 from 4 in their group stage if they are able to get the victory here. And that would also mean that my prediction of them topping their pool was correct, which, to be honest, at the start, I had no idea why I was saying they were going to be at the top, but somehow actually might have predicted it, which I'll take. I don't normally get things right, so I'm not used to this feeling. But yeah, for Wales, I think they're going to have a big showing here. They'll want to get a few minutes under their belt, of course, before heading into those playoff games, as they did have the bye last week. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I feel like it's going to be a physical matchup, and I just hope that for the Welsh sake, they don't end up with any injuries heading into those quarters, because I feel like at the moment, their selection's going very well, and they don't want to jeopardise that with any sort of injuries in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's been one of those games where, like I said beforehand, you'd assume it's going to be kind of like one-sided, traffic really, in terms of the Welsh just going, full front. But I don't know. I mean, Georgia just, they've shown they have something about them, and like you said, it could just be the opposite way where they used all their tank really in that game against Fiji, and it's just, they could be split wide open in this one, because Wales do have a lot of quick players, so we could see a lot of running in this one. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But again, we don't know the lineup for this one, but I do expect the Welsh to kind of go, choose a pretty strong lineup actually.
Although Wales were a weird team because they actually announced their side very early this week. Fun fact. Yeah, they went on.
Oh,
I think it was
let me know, by the way. Let me know what
Monday.
let me know what the team is actually.
So the Welsh lineup, I shall let you know because I'm good like that. One moment. Go like this. And we will click this button. And we will click this button. So their lineup is as follows. Gareth Thomas, Dewey Lake and Thomas Francis. Will Rowlands and Daff Jenkins as the locking duo. Wainwright, Reffel and Falatau as a loose forward trio. So that actually means that Dewey Lake will be captain rather than Jack Morgan. Thomas Williams and Gareth Anscombe, the 9-10, so no Dan Bigger at all in this side. Then also Rio Dyer, Nick Tompkins and George North, Lewis Rees-Sammer and Liam Williams. So pretty strong.
I was going to say, yeah, they've got a strong back line there. Yeah.
And I think only really Jack Morgan and also Dan Bigger, the only two who are majorly missing out compared to what we saw for their last match.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, that's the thing, like with the Welsh, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if, I assume Bigger hasn't, I mean, that injury he had, it didn't seem as big as it seems. So I think he should be ready in time for that quarterfinal. But hey, Gareth Anscombe, he's pretty proved, in that, that Wallaby game that he definitely has the ability to, create spaces and, kind of break a team. So, he can give you that option if needed. So it's going to be interesting because, Wales kind of have a similar dilemma now, kind of to like, I guess, the Box in a way where they have to choose between their two 10s because, Gareth Anscombe has been pretty impressive so far in this Rugby World Cup when he's stood up and given the minutes. So we'll see what happens there. But anyway, we'll move away from this game now. We'll move on then towards England-Samoa. England-Samoa, it's one of those games where really the English are, on a run, really. Yeah, they've won all their games so far in Group D. They've done pretty well, against obviously the Argentinians, the Japanese, as well as the Chileans. And now they're going against the likes of the Samoans here. And it's one of those where I think England I think it'll be a pretty comfortable win. I mean, what do you think about this one? Because again, I normally say this is one where Samoa could do something, but I just have a feeling where I think England will get a kind of comfortable win in this one.
Yeah, I don't think we've quite seen the Samoan World Cup that a lot of people were hoping for because when they had their close game up against the Irish, it was like, oh, okay, real contenders in that pool. But sadly, just moments and individual players who are out of form getting selected has actually really cost Samoa. I mentioned some names in the last one, Ben Lamb, Duncan Paiua, two men who probably shouldn't have even been touching that starting lineup jersey, both having two terrible games in a row. And I know that they always say one player doesn't make a side, but when you've got a few guys who are really just butchering it, to say the very least, when they're out there on the park, it does hurt the side overall. And I think for Samoa, they still could have done quite a few things different with the way that they selected their sides throughout this Rugby World Cup. And I don't want to say that that's down to the coach's faults. Like, they've gone with the strong side that should on paper be able to do well. It's just been a World Cup that they'd rather forget, I think. And this game up against England, like, if they can pull off the win, that will be massive for them. Then that always annoys supporters in some regards because they're like, well, why didn't you do that in the last game? You could have made your way through. But yeah, sadly for Samoa, I don't think no matter what the result is, even if they get a bonus point win here, that they can actually go through to the next stage due to their losses.
Yeah, fair enough. And the thing with that as well, like, talking about injuries, I mean, they've had Lima Samoa, who I did actually think going into it between Christian Leofel and him, Samoa was the one I actually wanted at 10. I've always been very honest in that sense. He's the one I've always preferred. And again, maybe if he, didn't have this injury, of course, and, if he was, had the ability to, if he was selected, then I don't know, maybe something could have been different for Samoa in this one because, he's at his day, any game, he can be a world-class player. So it's just a bit disappointing from his front, just, obviously from an injury standpoint. But yeah, look, like we said, England should be pretty good in this one. Should have no problems at all. Again, I don't think, they're already qualified, similar to, Wales. I think they're the only two teams still who have qualified for the quarterfinals. So it's one of those where, actually, no, and South Africa. I think South Africa qualified?
Oh, there's a real technicality that could still have
exactly. So we'll get into that later. But yeah, England and Wales are obviously still the two teams that have qualified officially. So I guess from an English standpoint, there's not really much to worry about. So again, we don't have the lineups for this one, but I assume England will kind of rest a few of their key players. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like Mara Toje, for example, maybe might be rested for this one, or we see the likes of I don't know. I mean, Manu Tonga, I don't see him being rested because I think he'll want to play against Samoa. I think that there'll be a bit of an end. A reason to play against him, but we'll see. There's
I
a few
think the
players.
trickiest one for England here will be who do they pick at 10? Do you go Farrell or do you go Ford?
Oh, I'd go Farrell easily.
You would?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Are you
think you have to go with Farrell.
Owen Farrell though for the quarterfinal?
No, so that's the thing. That's what I would say. You give 2 games to George Ford, which he's already had. Then you give the next. Well, because Owen Farrell obviously played the last one, which was Chile. And then I assume he would play this one. I put Marcus Smith again at 15. I think that worked pretty well. Again, it's one of those like where do you do that again, or do you want Freddie Stewart to have minutes? So that's the one where it's a bit more of a debate, I think. But in all honesty, I think you got to give Owen Farrell the minutes here, because that's when you can make the decision if you want to have Ford or Farrell for the quarterfinal, because they'll most likely face the likes of Fiji, you would say. So that's kind of like the team I'm most likely will be there unless there's something radical happens. But yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens there. But again, we'll discuss a lot more of that, I guess, in the build up to the quarterfinals in terms of what we believe could be the 10, the 10 for those games. But for that game in particular. But anyway, we'll move away from that game and we'll move on then probably to one of the bigger games of this week, which is definitely Ireland versus Scotland. This is one which, from a bot perspective, has me a bit worried because, like you said, there's people have looked at this like, really drastic, really in detail, particularly from a Scottish standpoint, see what they have to do to obviously get through to the knockouts. And it's fascinating because, there was a guy, I mean, I'm not sure if I'll put it into this video, but I saw on Twitter, there's a guy who made this whole Excel chart showing what is needed from, Scotland, what is needed from Ireland, what could happen for the box. So it's really fascinating. And I saw that, there's a lot of situations where the box could, realistically get knocked out, or there's a lot obviously in the favor of the Irish. There's obviously a lot more in favor of the Irish to get through. But for the Scottish, it's really 50-50 in terms of what they can do here, because it's really in their own hands in terms of, if they want to get through, they got to win this game, but they got to do it by a specific margin, which is the interesting bit about this. And, they got to make sure obviously that Ireland, don't get a bonus point as well, so there's a lot of things that come in the way of this. But going off, just the little points and detail in this. What do you think about this game overall? Like, who do you think will win? Just what do you think of this whole game?
I think Ireland will come out firing in the game because the last thing that they want to do is leave it too late in this contest, because, like you said, they only really need to walk away with 1 bonus point and they will be through to the next stage, and then it becomes the technicality of whether or not it's Scotland or the South Africans. But yeah, for Ireland, if they can secure that bonus point, like they'll be aiming to get it by the first half. 4 tries. Yeah. To be honest, it sounds like a big ask, but then we look at how Ireland have been playing throughout this Rugby World Cup. Scotland had a big game last week, don't get me wrong, up against Romania. They looked very good. Brilliant. But then saying that, I think about half of those players aren't going to be in this game up against the Irish. So how much cohesiveness are they going to have in that back line if they do make so many changes? The likes of Darcy Graham, I can see him keeping his spot on the side alongside Duan van der Merwe out on the other wing. Kinghorn, I believe that they will bring him back in as number 15 due to Ollie Smith showing that he does like to hang on to the ball rather than passing. As you know, Tim, I'm not a fan of those players sometimes, but yeah, I think for Scotland overall, like they just got to go out there and play a really hard, just strong game of rugby and hope that it will be enough. The biggest scenario that I've heard people talking about is if Scotland beat Ireland by 21 points and Ireland get the try bonus point, then South Africa are knocked out of this Rugby World Cup. And that seems to be the one that a lot of people are looking at. But the thing is, I'm just going to read the start of that again. If Scotland beat Ireland by 21.
Exactly. That's what I'm like, 21 points. I don't even see that happening.
And the Irish, theoretically, are getting themselves 20 points, at least, for their 4 tries being scored. So that means Scotland need to get into the 40s here, minimum, up against Ireland. And what side has been able to score more than, let's say, 15 points up against the Irish in recent times? Probably Tonga, I think they got 16, but that's not the
Yeah.
point. But it's a long margin
No,
that
it's
you're
been a
going to
long
get yourself
time.
up
Yeah.
with. So, yeah, the likeliness of it happening is slim, but the beauty of the World Cup is anything is possible, and you never quite know when that curveball is going to be thrown.
No, exactly. And it's one of those games where, yeah, I mean, going into it, you kind of do expect Ireland to be, just kind of steam past the Scottish in this sense, but you can never really underestimate the Scottish because, you can think of it more as a Six Nations game where normally when these two sides play, it's actually pretty competitive. So I think that's what Scotland will want to bring going into this game. And again, the Scottish didn't really play, I guess, they just didn't play well against the Box. Like the Box just kind of overpowered them in that sense. And again, it's just maybe the game, the style of play, which they haven't been used to playing in a long time. But of course, they faced the Irish in many occasions. If it comes towards even like the URC, which again, yes, I know they faced the Box in that as well, but they're obviously facing the Irish in the Six Nations, so they've had a bit more time to understand like how to play them and what's the game plan going into it. So it's going to be fascinating to see what both sides can bring. Again, I don't know. I feel this could be a close game, which again, like even if the Scots were somehow able to win this, I don't see it being like they're not going to get the margin which is needed, obviously, to advance. So it's going to be, tough. Heartbreaking, really, if that was the case. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm really excited to see what happens in that game, of course. But again, moving on towards the next one, which again, in my opinion, I do believe this is probably the game of the week. Because what do you think this is the game of the week? Because again, there's a lot that we can talk about here, but I think this is the game of the week, which is Japan versus Argentina. I just think it's one of those where, this really does have that playoff feel because these two sides they just have to win. It's just simple as that. They can win, and I think both sides have been pretty. I don't know who's actually been more impressive this World Cup, and I think that's a pretty hard one to say because, the Japanese, they in that game against England, I actually thought their first game was pretty impressive. Let's just get that out of the way. Their first game was very impressive. I believe it was against Chile, if I'm not mistaken. They kind of wiped the floor against them in that one. And against England, I thought they actually played, progressive rugby. They're actually, giving, England kind of a challenge in that sense, going to the 22 a lot of the times. But the problem is that they just weren't clinical, and they kind of gave tries to England in that sense. They had that one line out where they overthrew it, and England obviously snapped onto that, and obviously that unfortunate try, or where it hit Mahler's head and obviously which went straight into the hands of Cody Laws. So it's one of those where, yeah, I guess it just hasn't been in their favor in that sense. But again, if you're looking from an Argentinian standpoint, a lot of their games, they also had a similar kind of just not just, it was just really just a devastating defeat really against the English in that first game because they had it. They could have done something with that game, but they missed their opportunity. And again, against the Samoans, I thought they did pretty well in that one, but it wasn't as convincing as you would like to think. The Samoans I thought did pretty well in that one, so they made it difficult for the Argentinians. But again, we've seen the Argentinians, against the Chileans. Again, it's not the same team as what they've put out in the last two, but they did pretty well in that one. So it's tough to say who's had a better World Cup so far. So in your opinion, what do you think between the two sides? Who's impressed you more?
I would probably say Japan, mainly
Okay.
because people expected Argentina to do well. And because
Yeah.
they didn't really find their feet in their first couple games, I think that would be the argument in Japan's favor, is the fact that Japan went out there in their first game, got the victory. Argentina's fight back, I would say, has been the more impressive, seeing as they did lose that first game, had to try and find their momentum once more. Yeah, both sides have had some very good performances throughout this Rugby World Cup, and both of them, I feel, will really challenge Wales in the next stage of the competition.
Yeah.
And I know theoretically a lot more people want to see Argentina versus Wales, seeing as we have seen that game a little bit more recently. But I think that Japan, depending on how far they go in this World Cup, I know that the rumours of Eddie Jones jumping to the Japanese coaching side of things has been about. But if Japan keep on going well, I don't think they should sign him. He's currently got a terrible winning record with the Australians, and the current coaches seem like they're starting to find that rhythm that they need to go far in this comp. So I've heard quite a few people mentioning as well, which I am going to ask you about. Might as well ask you now, seeing as we're on the topic. People were talking about when Argentina made it through to the semi-finals back in the day of the Rugby World Cup, that is actually when we saw a massive push for them to join the Rugby Championship, turn it from the Tri-Nations into 4 teams. If Japan or Fiji go far in this Rugby World Cup, do you see the argument for the competition to be extended in the near future, or do you think they would still hold off even if Fiji or Japan go well? Imagine either of those sides somehow make it to the final. What do they do from there?
I actually do think something could happen in the future in terms of the Rugby Championship because, like you said, Argentina is seen as that first team who really broke into this. Well, really was seen as a tier 2 nation and became a tier 1. I think they're really the first team that I think of in that sense because, like you said, they did this way back, like really back in 2007 in that Rugby World Cup when they made the semifinals. And they did it again, obviously, in 2015. But of course, but the reason why they did it again was because the Rugby Championship, they got in, I think, in 2012. It was like somewhere, I think it was after the 2011 Rugby World Cup where they included Argentina, I think. I could be wrong, but it was somewhere around there. And because of that, like you said, getting a lot more, minutes, a lot more games against tier 1 nations, being the likes of the All Blacks, Springboks, and Wallabies, then, they became a kind of not a juggernaut, but they definitely became a better team in that sense. And I do believe, what we've seen with the Japanese and the the Japanese and the Fijians, I think they definitely have shown that they could make that jump. I actually do think they can do it. But the only problem though is that it all comes down to this global calendar, which is what World Rugby is trying to organize at the moment. And again, there's a few details which have been, I guess, made public already. I know that there's obviously going to be a change. I think it was in 2026. They said where there's going to be more tier 1 games, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember what was it. It was like it was a whole competition, if I to what I recall, where it meant that there would be less games against the tier 2 nations, which is obviously not good from a Fijian and Japanese standpoint. So if they were to get involved, then they have to do it before 2026. I think that's the way I'm thinking about this. And I would love to see him in because, again, I've already actually discussed this in a video of mine on my channel where I think both the Japanese and Fijians can add different qualities to the Rugby Championship, where the Japanese, yes, they obviously add, great rugby in that sense and their fan base, but really it's, they bring a lot of, money to the table, which is a good thing for rugby and obviously a great thing for the Southern Hemisphere because, we've obviously known for a long time the Southern Hemisphere has been pretty behind from an economic position compared to the, compared to, I guess, the North or compared to the Northern Hemisphere teams. So it would be a great thing to obviously include Japanese in that front. And of course, what Fiji has been able to do, since including them within Super Rugby for Fiji Jura, they've demonstrated that they definitely have the ability to challenge teams in that sense. And because they've added that team, it allows them to, kind of play more consistent minutes, which has enabled them to be, much better in this Rugby World Cup. And from that, it should, they play a great style of rugby. I think that's what they add more to the table than what Japanese do. But also, it's just, it's Fiji. Everyone loves Fiji. And you want to get more of that, really. So I'd love to see both these sides included. But it's one of those where, like I said, it really just comes down to the timing of when it happens. And I hope it's before the next World Cup. Let's just say that. I hope it's before then. Because if they don't do it before the next World Cup, oh, my gosh, I think they're going to lose out on an opportunity here. But, yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on that front. But anyway, we'll move away from that game now. We'll move on then towards, I guess, the Sunday games which are happening. And again, the last 2 Sunday games, and they're not really the most, I guess, like eye-opening games. We're going to see, obviously, with Tonga, Romania, and Fiji, Portugal. Not to obviously overshadow those games, but I mean, first of all, with Tonga, Romania, it's one of those games where Tonga, I was very impressed by them, obviously, seeing them live against the Box. It'll be a good kind of final game to finish off for them, kind of like the last dance, to say the least, and, good to see the likes of Pierre Tal, Ben Tamafena, who else? I think, will Viva Fita be available? I'm not sure if he'll be, because he had the
I
red
think
card,
he's
right?
still going to be a little bit longer, yeah.
Yeah, so he
But
won't
they'll
be
still
available
have
for this.
Fekitoa
Yeah,
in that
Pikachu.
midfield.
Yeah, they'll have Pulu. They'll have. I mean, they have a ton of great players in there anyway. So, I mean, I expect them to do pretty well in this one and just get kind of a good run out in this one. So, I mean, what's your take on this game? Just on what you think of it?
Yeah, I think that Tonga should be able to give themselves a decent enough victory. The good news for them is they've got out of this competition, I believe, to a certain extent, a lot less injuries than they would have thought going into it. Like
Yes.
they've had a couple
Yeah.
players that have looked a little bit injured at times, but overall, like I think they'll be relatively happy with what they've been able to do throughout this Rugby World Cup campaign because being in such a tough group, straight away when you look and there's 3 of the top 5 sides around the world in your group, when you're ranked about 14th, it's not going to be fun. But
Yeah.
I think in every single game that we've seen the Tongans play, they've actually improved. You know, that first game up against the Irish, they put on a decent showing, managing to score themselves 16 points, I believe it was, in the end. Then they played up against the Scottish, scoring 17 points, playing the Springboks and scoring the most tries out of any side up against the South Africans
Impressive.
throughout this Rugby World Cup. So there's been improvement for Tonga, and I think it's just the perfect example as well of what good playing more rugby can do for these international sides that normally don't get to take part in so many July and November internationals. Those Rugby World Cup warm-up games for Tonga I thought were a little bit rough because they only got to play up against the Canadians, and don't get me wrong, would have been a nice challenge for them, but I would have loved to see them get that little bit of a higher caliber of opposition heading into this Rugby World Cup, and I think it would have heavily benefited the way that they went. That's not saying that they would have caused any upsets along the way, but I'd say if you gave Tonga about 3 more games of this Rugby World Cup with the way that they have been slowly going in the right direction, like they would probably, you know, they wouldn't be too far off beating a lot of the sides, or some of the sides anyway, inside of that kind of maybe 10 to 5 region of the world rankings.
Yeah, yeah. No, it can definitely happen for sure. And it's one of those where, I mean, even like you said, when it comes towards, I guess, the games they've played in the build up to this World Cup, they obviously do, they're a part of obviously the Pacific Nations Cup, and that's been, I think, a good thing that, World Rugby's added. I think it's happened now for the last, you'll have to correct me on this, but I think it's happened for the last 2 years now. They've added this. So it's that's been a good thing, obviously, because it's helped these teams obviously just get, more game time, which is needed. But the problem with that, though, just to make a counterpoint, is that one of the teams involved in this competition is Japan. So by losing the Japanese, if we're hypothetically saying if we add them to the Rugby Championship, does that hurt that competition? And like who would replace Japan? Because it's a bit of a question where like who would come into the front? Like where do you get a team from Europe to come down? Like do you get a team from? I mean, I can't really think. Maybe you get from the Southern Hemisphere. Maybe you get Uruguay to become involved, because I can see them being a good team to maybe include. Because they've demonstrated throughout this World Cup, they can pull off some good performances, and they have a lot of good players who are kind of on have a good future, I think, in terms of rugby itself. So I think Uruguay is a team they should look to maybe include. Maybe I'm thinking too far ahead, by the way, in this, but I'm just thinking if Japan were to move away from that Pacific Nations Cup competition and join the Rugby Championship, I think Uruguay would make the most logical sense. But again, they would have to like move. They would have to like play similar to what Japan. I guess like, it's so difficult because
the other side of things is, are you taking Fiji into the Rugby Championship as well?
Exactly.
Remember they're
I was about to say Fiji as well. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, so yeah. See, this is what I hate, is that for Samoa and Tonga, they would get it would hurt them so much in that sense if Fiji and Japan were to leave. But I guess you can like base. I mean, I'm trying to think of a logical way where you can include teams like Samoa, Tonga. I mean, I would include Uruguay in that front. Even Chile. I think I would put Chile in that conversation as well. And then there's another team. I'm trying to think if there's like another team you could add, but again, I'm thinking more geographically in that sense. I don't want to make a team from Europe come down, because I don't think that makes sense in that way. But I don't know. Maybe you could think of. Gosh, is there a team I'm forgetting? Like in that region of the world who could be added?
I think that from the sides that you've mentioned, they may look at adding like maybe Canada or the USA or something along those lines.
Yeah,
Maybe have them play Uruguay and Chile and have like a mini North American competition with South America. And then you have the Pacific Island teams maybe playing up against each other. The winner of those games go head-to-head in some sort of mini 3-match series or something like that. They've got to find a way of keeping them playing, though. That is the main
Yeah.
thing,
Okay.
which is tricky to do.
No, I love that idea actually. That could be a good way of doing it. So like they play like a free test match series, like similar to like what we saw, because there was a whole thing about like how I saw recently how the All Blacks and Springboks are kind of maybe they're thinking about doing, kind of bringing back the I guess the tours in that sense, which we saw before the Rugby Championship, where that's a thing which they may want to add once again, because obviously the Boks are no longer a part of Super Rugby. So well, sorry, the South African teams are no longer Super Rugby. So you'd add that kind of aspect which fans may be missing from a club perspective, to see these teams, two sides face off against each other a bit more. But we could maybe see that from Tonga and Fiji. Oh, sorry, with Tonga and Samoa. That could be something which maybe you see, like where Tonga would go to Samoa for a free match series, and then the next year they go to Tonga in that sense, and just do vice versa. So yeah, there could be something. I actually love that idea. But again, we're moving on towards the last game here. Obviously, one of those being teams we've mentioned already, Fiji facing the likes of Portugal. Realistically, they only need, I think, 1 point. That's literally all they need from this game. So, I mean, they're in a position where, I mean, unless Portugal wipe the floor with them, then, they're practically through to the quarterfinal, which is an amazing thing to think. Obviously, going into this, just before this World Cup happened, like, we were obviously a bit skeptical in terms of, the three teams in this group being Wales, Australia, and Fiji, who would actually be the one to go out. And I don't know. I mean, like, I think you're only I think you're one of the only few people that said the Wallabies actually would not make it, which I thought was crazy because, it's I don't know, but I mean, the more I think about it, it made a lot of sense, because I guess the Wallabies just didn't have a good year, and then got into this, like, will they continue that form or pick it up? Yeah, I mean, because again, we've seen teams like Wales, who else? Wales, England, Japan, who in a similar sense haven't had a really good year going into this World Cup, but have been able to change their fortunes around. But it seems that Australia's been that one team where their form just hasn't really spiked in that way. So yeah, it's been a bit unfortunate for them in that sense, but obviously a great thing for Fiji, in which they've been able to capitalize on. So, I mean, what's you think about this game overall? Because again, like I said, they only need 1 point. So yeah, what's your perspective?
I think that this could be game of the weekend. Calling it now.
Really? Okay,
I think
like
so.
that.
I think it's going to be fast-paced. The Portuguese will be coming to play. The Fijians will be throwing everything at them as well. I believe Fiji will get themselves the win, but I think it's going to be one of those games that everyone goes, well, that was a nice way to finish off the group stages. Now we're heading towards those quarterfinals, because Fiji want to take on England again, because they beat them last time. They know that they've got that one under their sleeve, and they know that they've got that mental edge just for now over the English, up until those two sides go head-to-head again, and who knows what way that could end up going. But I believe for Fiji, one of the main changes that we need to see is, of course, Tevita Ikanaveri making his way into that starting lineup. Probably Asuana Silasila also getting a bit of a spell at lock. The lineouts were not anywhere near as accurate as they needed to be for the Fijians in that last game. And I think that there's probably going to be a few changes in that backline as well, but some for the better, some for the worse, but they will still make sure that they go out there and have a massive performance here up against the Portuguese. I think it's going to be an awesome game.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I mean, like, I want to actually get your quick take on this, because I wasn't. I mean, I'm kind of 50-50 at the same time with this question here, because again, going into this World Cup, I actually wanted Ikanaveri to be the starting hooker for the Fijians, but again, they obviously have gone with the likes of Sam Batavasi. So what do you think? I mean, has he proven throughout this World Cup, Batavasi, to be? I mean, just think of it hypothetically, if they were to get into quarterfinals, who do you choose out of the two? Because I think Matavasi has played pretty well, actually, in some of the games he's actually been played in. But again, like you said, it was that one game, which is obviously the last one, where he was a bit off, and obviously that kind of puts a bit of doubt in that sense. So, like, who do you kind of choose in that out of the hookers to play in that quarterfinal, if they were to obviously to get there?
Well, I feel like he was a bit off in that game up against Australia as well, which is actually why, in my original prediction, I wanted to see Ikanaveri come in for the Georgian game, because I knew that Matavesi had the potential of costing them the match, and he all but did, unfortunately, in that match up against the Georgians. So Ikanaveri, for me, anytime he's come off the bench, has had a real impact, whether it's the running meters that he has been able to get alongside that line-out throw being accurate. So, yeah, I'll go Ikanaveri every day of the week. I think the harder question at the moment for the Fijians is, do you go with Frank Lamani or Simeone Kuravuli in the starting lineup after Lamani's great impact off the bench? Kuravuli's great start-up against the Wallabies. I feel like the good news is the two players are in decent form. In fact, some very good form going into these later games. So I honestly think that they'll pick one of them to start in this game and then probably a Pini Matawalu as the man who comes off the bench just to give the other a rest and have him fresh for that game of the quarterfinals.
Interesting. Okay. So what who would you then choose? Just so that I'm curious to just same question again. Who would you choose if they were to get into the quarterfinal? Would you choose Kuravoli, or would you go with the likes of Lamani, who he did pretty well off the bench? Because personally, I think I'd probably go Kuravoli, but because he started more, and it makes sense because Lamani's actually done well off the bench. It's kind of like the Roygaard situation where I think Roygaard at the moment, from an All Black perspective, is seen better off the bench because obviously you do have the likes of Aaron Smith, but he has done pretty well when he started it as well. So it's kind of that same argument once more. So what's your take on that?
At the start of the competition, I was edging towards Kuravuli, and I would say I'm probably still in that same boat, mainly because, like you mentioned, the Lamani impact that we've seen. We've got our prediction coming out tomorrow, or I think today, when this podcast comes out, for our Fijian side that we think they'll go with for this upcoming game, and I actually went with Lamani in the starting lineup in that regard. So I'm resting Kuravuli this week and then bringing him back in.
Start the next one,
so he'll be fresh, for that game of the quarterfinals. So I'll probably edge it to Lamani. Tete Teller at 10 at the moment is still a bit of a worrying sign, I guess you could argue. So whether or not they start also going with maybe Vilamoni Botitu could start this game as well. I like how this will all be coming out, and then at the time that this is out, we will almost know the Fijian lineup, but see whether or not we're completely wrong or completely right.
Exactly. I just wish Caleb Munns was available. He would have been great in here, but
game changer.
He's young as well.
He would have been.
I just hate that, but because we both picked him, by the way, in our, I believe this player could do pretty well. So it's just pretty funny to think he's not even included. Well, he's just not even part of this team now, which is just kind of sad to see. But anyway, we're going to leave it there, guys, obviously, for this preview for round 5 of the Rugby World Cup. Obviously, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Definitely like the video. Subscribe to our channel and check out our respective channels. And we'll see you guys next time.